Alrighty, guys, welcome back to the Identity Project. Today, I'm extremely excited. I have a guest on, Mr. Chewning. He is the man that actually got me to launch this podcast and kind of help me get everything started. So, what is going on, my man? How are you?
I'm so happy for you, man. Thanks for having me on, and just the action I've seen you take in that initial conversation of what's up podcast, or like which mic do I get to, here you are so many episodes deep, man. That's awesome. Congrats. Welcome to the space.
I appreciate it. Yeah, man, I've really fallen in love. I think back when we first met there in Vegas was when I started like getting on podcasts for the first time. And after doing all those interviews, I was like, man, like I need to start a podcast. Like, this is awesome.
It's my favorite platform, to be honest. It's in our space of, building relationships with other people, clients. You can do a lot in person. You can do a lot via video and content creation, right? YouTube, Instagram. There are a lot of great things you can do. But for me, just being able to have this medium, this platform of just true conversation, and it just produces something really unique, I found. And I love it. And honestly, I can understand why people like Joe Rogan go like 2-3 hours sometimes. But hopefully we won't go that long. We'll keep the audience attention span a little bit shorter today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I will say I did listen to a couple of those nutrition talks on the Joe Rogan podcast that were like 3 hours long or whatever, the debates. But that's probably the only thing I would have listened to for that long.
Yeah, at that point, you just got to pause, come back. Because I don't know about you. I mean, especially probably not now, new dad life. You probably don't have 3 extra hours to just block off, right?
Right. Yeah, I think it took me like 3 or 4 days to finish the full podcast. So, yeah. But dude, so first off, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. I'm super excited to dive into your story, man. I think obviously the first time I met you was there August or September in Vegas, but I've kind of, started following you and really just seeing everything that y'all are doing with Ever Forward. And, I'm excited today to be able to just dive into your story, but hopefully, go as deep as we possibly can. I really want to take it back to the elementary school days and really just kind of hear the whole journey, man. How did you get to where you are today?
Oh man, that's the $1 million question, right? I think anybody who asks that, they want to kind of say the most recent thing or most recent things, right? Oh, I did this, I went here and launched this program, or went to this place, and that's why I am who I am today, or what I needed to do, right? But I love this whole concept of the identity with what you're doing here. And I truly believe that where we are now is deep rooted in that old former self, like literally that elementary school kind of version you were talking about, because that's a part of our identity. That's a part of who we are that most people don't truly know or are unaware of. Like, our formidable conscious self happens between the ages, like 3 to 7. That's when the brain becomes more aware. That's when we start developing memories, and we're more impressionable, and those impressions last longer. And that certainly rings true for me. With everything that I'm doing now, who I am and who Chase is and who Everforward is and what I do and what we do. For us, that brand and the message is because of a lot of things in our upbringing, in our family, and that kind of identity. But it truly was kind of set in stone way back then, way back elementary school. That's when we first started kind of hearing these 2 words that our dad always said, first kind of experiencing the community aspect, the interaction of family and the importance of that, and what it was like, the good times, the bad times, and the oogly times of, entrepreneurship and family and all the above. It's, it was a time when I was not anywhere near who I am today in terms of just like socioeconomic status and geographical status. To stay true to your question, elementary school, Chase was running amok in like the 100-acre wood in the mountains of Virginia. I grew up way out in the country. I'm the oldest of 3. I've got a younger sister and then a younger brother. And we grew up with our grandparents. We lived with our grandparents for a long time on their property, in their house. And just being involved with nature. I was always active, had this amazing big garden my grandparents grew. So we ate a lot of the foods that we grew. So from there, my identity was really latched on to, being, kind of one with the earth and being out and enjoying it, and also sowing into it and then reaping those rewards and eating it. And then, things kind of changed over time, and we kind of found ourselves becoming a little bit more city folk, I guess, moving into town. Literally for us, because it was about a 20-minute drive into town. Our nearest neighbor was like a couple miles away, and got to see and feel and taste this entrepreneurship. After our dad got out of the Army, he went into opening his own businesses, had a string of coffee houses and a lot of other endeavors in between there. So, I mean, I'll go back to your original question. Who I am today is definitely deep rooted in that time frame for sure.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. I want to kind of dive into that early childhood because, like you said, like, I think that shapes so much of who we are today. So like, talk to me, like, what were your interests back then? Like, in elementary school, middle school, high school, like, did you grow up like playing sports? Like what did that kind of early childhood look like for you?
Yeah, I would say my identity back then and what I looked like, who I thought I looked like in elementary, middle school, high school, I was kind of, I guess, a chameleon. I never really had a really strong sense, if I'm being true with myself now and really looking back. I mean, then again, who really knows himself as a teenager, right? I kind of just latched on to the people and things around me, truthfully, even to the extent of like haircuts. I remember this one kid, I'll never forget him. This guy, Nathan, and my other buddy, Jeremy, in middle school was like the first time I ever saw this, like, I think now we know it as like the undercut haircut. It was like kind of shaved on the sides and like pulled back on top. And it was like super trendy, and even just down to the haircut and the pants and after school activities, I kind of just latched on to what I saw other people doing. And so, yeah, I kind of just went through that period, just trying to maybe fit in, trying to do the cool things. I played sports. Our school didn't have a whole lot to offer. I went to a small private school, and so we kind of just latched on to whatever the local intramural club had to offer. But I played baseball pretty much my whole life, though, from kindergarten all the way through middle school, a little bit of high school. I loved baseball. I loved it. I loved it. And did like a couple years of lacrosse. And never really had like a super strong passion on anything, but I always enjoyed, honestly, just the enjoyment of others. So as long as I was around other people who loved what they were doing, and I was around places and things that kind of just gave me that vibe, I truly just enjoyed being around that type of person, that type of place, which definitely feeds into what I'm doing now, is just truly my greatest sense of happiness and enjoyment, and how I feel fulfilled is when I'm with other people achieving that, or at least now helping them, through a podcast message or a coaching practice, whatever it may be. So I now know who I am in that sense, and I can better kind of channel my energy and my area of expertise while still being a part of that community environment of just growth and people really standing firm in who they are.
Love that. When you were growing up, were you so would you consider yourself like an extrovert growing up, or?
Yeah. I was always very outgoing, still am. I'll talk to a wall. I'll talk to a stranger, anybody and everybody. I'm always like networking. I guess now that I'm an adult, it's networking. Back then, it's just called being friendly, right? I was always just intrigued with other people and what they were doing and why they like to do it and their story, really. And just getting to know people's story meant so much to me. And so, I would always talk to anybody and everybody.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was actually very, very like introverted. I think I've challenged myself to come more and more out of my shell like over the past 10 years. But yeah, I don't know. That's just how I was. Like I really enjoyed like me time, if you will.
I can respect that. I honestly seek out more me time this day and age. Maybe just because I've gotten busier, or #adulting, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of going on that and just like, finding this fulfillment and like, helping others, if you will, is kind of like what you do now. But maybe if there weren't like, I don't know, athletes that you looked up to growing up, were there like movies? Like, what were your favorite movies? Like in terms of telling stories, like, I'm just curious as to what made you fall in love with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. now, and certainly then, I was always a huge movie guy. Never really watched a whole lot of TV. I can definitely rattle off a bunch of like Office and New Girl quotes. I guess I'm more selective with my TV series, but movies were always a big thing for me. And I think also because they were a big thing for my dad. It was one of the things we always used to do together. Him and I, and me and my brother and my sister was go to movies. And sometimes when my mom was away, or it was just my dad and I, because maybe it was just the oldest, he would let me watch rated R movies when I was like 12, 13 years old. And I was in a pretty strict household. So honestly, for him to let me do that was pretty impressive. But I always latched on to the story aspect visually. And to this day, some of my favorite movies are more the storylines. I love The Matrix and Gladiator. Cinematically, they're just wonders, but it's the story behind it. Things like The Truman Show, movies like I just recently rewatched The Gray with Liam Neeson. On surface level, you see all these things happen. In a movie, I'll go off that example, you see these things happen, and there are different tricks that they can use with the camera and sound and editing to kind of keep your attention. But for me, it's always come down to the story. I don't really need a whole lot of CGI. I need a whole lot of action because I truly invest in the story. And also with music, my dad and I are huge music fans. And for me, I always latch onto the lyrics first. I say this a lot in terms of just reflecting on my own life, but certainly now that you're kind of pointing out the examples of the movies, and now that I'm bringing up the music, it's the story aspect that always rings so true to me. And I don't like have memories. I have emotions. I don't remember things, or I don't hear things. I connect on like a really emotional level. My wife makes fun of me all the time because like I probably cry more than she does. It's like total transparency. I feel. I don't know. I think a lot of it has to do with being a part of so many other stories as I was growing up with my parents and my grandparents and my brothers and my sisters. All these different stories were being woven together in this fabric of my life. And again, that's what I do now is, connect with people and their stories. And I tell stories on the podcast. And, for me, when I hear a song, the music may be terrible, but if the lyrics are like hitting home, I'm just breathless. And for me, it's just amazing. I think the human experience, the human journey is so unlike anything else in this world. And each one is different. Each story is different. And again, that's why I love the podcast. I'm so happy for you to be on this platform. It's because it's such a unique way to hear and be a part of other people's stories. And it just hits home with me. It really does. I feel everything. It's not just words or a movie or a song. It's an emotional response for me.
Yeah, man. I love that, man. I experienced something this last Wednesday that was the most emotional response that I've ever felt in my whole entire life. Like, I literally, like, going through the process of like seeing my wife like have our child, like I was bawling like uncontrollably. Like I literally couldn't stop. And I mean, I'm definitely like a more emotional guy, and I get that from my mom, like 100%. But yeah, man, that was, people say it's the craziest thing you'll ever experience, and they were 100% right.
I'm with you, man. My wife now, I don't know if you could call it a vision. I don't know if you call it a vision or what, but I already have this whole image in my head of when she's delivering our first kid, where we are, like even to the point of where the nurse is, where the doctor is, where I'm in the room, and just thinking about it, I'll just like shed a tear. And Mail look over at me and tell me to shut up. But yeah, man, congrats to you again, by the way, on that. It's huge.
Thank you. Yeah, it's crazy, man. I mean, I like, it sounds crazy. Like I literally feel like the room, like I don't know. It was like the room, like everything in the room. It was like something out of a movie. Like it just like went like white, and it was like there was just it was just like
experiencer.
Yeah, it's just crazy, so crazy. So that's. Yeah, I think back on it now, and it's just like from an emotional standpoint, like, there's so many people that like maybe through things that they went through in their life, like maybe they suppress certain things, right? Because like those emotions that they had at one point in their life, it was such a struggle then, and they don't want to experience it anymore. So I'm just so interested on like that emotional side of things. And that's kind of what prompted this whole like identity mapping process and kind of diving into all of these different assessments. I think human, behavior psychology is one of the most fascinating things out there.
Oh yeah. And you hit the nail on the head. It's that experience part. It's everything that happens to us that most people don't, I think, realize. And keyword you said there, suppress, is people forget that we're human. And when we go through these experiences, as we are living out these characters as part of our life and our story, we're human first, which means we have these defense mechanisms, and a lot of them are subconscious, and they're part of this background system that runs to just keep us breathing, organ function, and just survival. And when a lot of trauma happens and we don't fully realize that it is trauma doesn't need to be a baseball bat to the head. It doesn't need to be blunt force. It can be emotional, it can be spiritual, it can be physical, it can be all of these things. It's the emotional ones, it's the mental ones, it's the spiritual ones that I don't think people fully give enough credit to, because we don't fully realize that they're actually happening. And that was a trigger word for me. I mean, suppress. I went through years of suppressing a lot of these emotional traumas through the loss of our father. I've referenced him a lot. He was such a huge component of my life. Him and I were best friends. We did a lot of things together. He was such an amazing role model for me in a lot of different ways of what it was to be a man. He was a soldier also himself. He was a husband. He was a business owner. He was a son. He was a brother. And for the first only 19 years of my life, until we lost him, I got this timeline of everything that I wanted to be, and every person, every version of myself. Now I know this because I'm a little bit older, of who I needed to become, of, chase the husband, chase the brother, soon, not far off, maybe chase the father, chase the son, all these different versions, chase the business owner, chase the soldier. I was active duty Army for 6 years. And when that happened, when he was diagnosed with terminal illness, and in 18 months, it was all gone. And that changed my identity. I suppressed all of that. I didn't really deal with it. I do think a lot of it, a good amount of it, was because I was so young. I was 18, 19 when he got sick and when he passed away. And, we cognitively don't have the full capability, I believe, to kind of handle that amount of emotional trauma. And so, yeah, I spent the next 8-10 years really suppressing a lot of that. I would work through some stuff and then I would suppress it. I would work through some stuff and suppress it. A lot of it I kind of had to push down, because I had to go back to being Army chase. I had to go back to being a soldier, and couldn't really deal and really grieve in the way that I should have. And it changed me a lot. It formed me into a couple identities that I didn't like. I ran away from my problems. I suppressed them. It made me suffer through, made some relationships suffer in terms of family and personal and professional. And it was only really truly once I not only acknowledged, but fully honored that emotional trauma that I went through, full disclosure, diagnosed PTSD from it. Just the level, like I told you, I feel everything. I don't just remember things, I feel everything. And just when I would have flashbacks or see a movie scene, or be in a movie theater and someone would die, or someone would say they have cancer, or someone would just go through this horrible trauma in their life, I would have panic attacks. I would have to leave the theater. I would pull over my car. I was unsafe to drive. And it got to those points long term. I was telling myself this lie that I could just keep suppressing it. And that wasn't really trauma, but for me to have like these out of body experiences and to not be in control of my own thoughts and my own body, recognize that I was really at some points putting my own self in danger, not being true to some relationships in my life at that time, and putting them in danger. That I had to really deal with that, and really acknowledging and owning that I was suppressing a lot of this experience, a lot of those identities that I thought I was and I really wasn't. And I was really suppressing my true identity. And it only was until I really dove into that work and became open with it and consistently got help with it and let the right people into my life to share that, what I was really suffering with, that it became so much better. And it was through, it took about a year or two, I would say, just true consistent work, vulnerability, honesty, therapy, a lot of different modalities to really know who I am, to know who the hell I am, and to be well established in my identity now.
Wow. It's amazing, man. I mean, I shared, you know, obviously my story on the podcast with you, and
You've seen your fair share of the trauma in a lot of ways. Yeah, man, your background's insane.
yeah. Well, and I think that, I mean, in terms of like dealing with it, like, I mean, like I had mentioned for you, is like that was like my rock bottom, or like my lowest low or whatever, and it was the moment, luckily at 18 years old, that was so awakening, and like made me realize you're not invincible, and like you get one shot, like that's it, and this could all be gone in a blink of a second. So was there something that happened? Like, I mean, what made you realize, like what made you actually start taking steps to, to face this?
I honestly had my now wife, my girlfriend, we were dating at the time, really kind of, this is just true to her character. She's a no BS kind of girl, no bullshit. Like it's, hey, get it together or like get out kind of thing. And we were watching this movie. I can't even remember what it was. And there was a death, and the person came in and they pulled like the sheet over the body, right? To take him down. I think it was like in a hospital room, or taking him down to the morgue. Insert like any scene here. It's a very stereotypical pull the sheet over the body and like, oh. And that set off probably one of my biggest, I guess, was a panic attack to date. And this is several years ago, like 4 or 5 years ago. And it was almost reminiscent also, like my entire medical history here. I've had a seizure before. I hit my head really hard, gave myself a concussion, even to the level of a mild TBI. And I had a concussion and I was like alert in my body, but I couldn't do anything. I was just convulsing. And it was very, very reminiscent to that experience. I could tell, I knew where I was. I could tell that May was with me, right beside me. I knew that was in my apartment. I knew what year it was, all the basic things, but I had no control over my body. I was drenched, like head to toe, soaking wet in this cold sweat. And my eyes were getting to roll back in my head. And I was transported back in time because I was unluckily, I would definitely say luckily, with my dad the last hours of his life. I physically wasn't there when he took his literal last breath, because I'd been awake for almost 3 days by his side in the hospital. And I had to go take my sister to work, and I went home to try to catch a couple hours sleep and come back to the hospital. And that's when I got the call that he had passed. And then I did go into the room. My mom was there, my stepmom, my sister, a couple friends, a family friend of ours. And then that happened. The sheet goes over the head. And I was immediately transported back in time, and just all of the rage and sorrow and grief and every emotion you can imagine came right back. It was as if I was right there in that room again. And she was like shaking me and trying to like get me out of it. And she was like, Chase, like, you can't go on like this. And at that point, I'd already had a couple when I was driving. Like I said, my dad and I were big into music. We liked a lot of the same bands, and I would hear a song, even just the first couple of notes of a song, and I would have to pull over. I would have very, very similar panic attacks like that. Because again, I was transported back in time to that room, to the visits, and just seeing him wither away, the nature of his illness. Lou Gehrig says he's ALS. You just become a prisoner in your own body. The body literally eats itself until it shuts down. And it just transported me back every time. And that was the worst one that I had. And she just flat out was like, hey, like, you can't keep going on like this. You can't run away from every movie. And if we're in a theater, you got to leave, or, you're going to endanger yourself behind the wheel of a car. I want to be able to watch a movie with you and, watch a movie and not have to like shake you back to reality. And that for me was kind of like a big literal waking moment. And from there, I went back to some mental therapists. I dove, at that point I was going through kind of like a self-help journaling kind of experience, and just really getting to know myself more. And that was a big part of the practice. I dove deeper into it. I made sure that was a non-negotiable for me, to just get these things out of my head on paper, reflect on them, and then use that to go into the mental health. I believe she was a psychologist at the time. With the VA system, you never know who you're going to see if you get the same person twice. So I think I bounced around a couple different people. But yeah, that for me, she literally shook me and kind of like was like, hey, you get it together. Like, I care about it. like some tough love for sure. But she was like, hey, if we're going to have a future together, if we're going to have kids together, if we're going to watch a movie together ever again, I want to know that you're going to be okay. And so that was her way to kind of like help me own my shit a little bit,
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I remember Alex, my wife, and I mean, she's played such a huge role in my life. I mean, from the junior and senior year of high school and my crazy rave days to, I mean, I basically met her 1 year after high school. So yeah, like right after I got pretty much like back from Kansas. And so just growing up together with her and just seeing how much we've changed since then is incredible. But my mom, I think after we had been dating for like 4 or 5 years, she was like, what, like, are you going to ask this girl to marry you or what? Like, you're going to lose this girl. And I like that. It was kind of another moment for me. Like, I realized it's like, oh my God, like, I don't want that to happen. It's almost like we don't realize like how much we like appreciate somebody or love somebody until like they're gone. And so like,
sure. We take them for granted,
100%.
Whether we want to admit it or even realize it or not, we take them for granted because we get so comfortable. And yeah, it's not right or wrong, but it is what it is, man. I can relate.
Yeah, absolutely. So how are you influenced? I mean, obviously your dad put a really, really big role in your life. How, like, he was in the military and then obviously you've kind of followed his footsteps as well. Like talk to me a little bit more about like kind of that high school journey. Like, did you know from, high school age, like as soon as you entered that you're going to be going into the military, or like, how did that all foster?
Yeah. And again, I was, I hate to say forget, but a big majority of my story and my upbringing, and especially when it comes to my belief system and hell, my business and our brand now, comes from our dad. But just as important and vital as he was to who I am today and my upbringing, my stepmom is as well. My parents split when I was about 5 or 6, but very soon after that, maybe a year or so after they split, my dad met Rhonda, my stepmom now. And she was just as important and vital to my upbringing as anybody else. I call her my mom. She raised me. She is more my mom in a lot of ways than my biological. And it's not a knock to my biological mom, but just a matter of who was present more and who wasn't, and who filled in the gaps when my dad was away in the Army. So as a child, but then again, in middle school, high school, she and he both were very, very key stakeholders really in that decision to join the military. When they met, my dad was already he was he was part-time Army. He was in the National Guard, and that's when he met my stepmom. So she already kind of knew that about him. And then he went active, basically went from part-time to full-time Army. And so when he was away, he was stationed a couple states away for about 2 years. And he came home every chance he could. It's funny, I saw him more when he was stationed 8 hours away than when he was an entrepreneur running his own business. The nature of that game. But my stepmom stepped up and she raised me. She raised my brother. My sister was mostly with our biological mom, but if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have really known that support system. And that is very integral in the military, which I think is one of the biggest things that I miss in the military, is that support system, whether it's you and like the brothers and sisters to the left and right of you, your chain of command, but also the military is very, very heavily focused on familial support system, the family. And she embodied that. And I got to see that. I got to really, really have this role model of a mom and a dad and what true love looks like. And more importantly, that support system when you're on the home front and when you're away. And it was really appealing to me. I saw all the benefits. I literally saw the benefits. My dad talked about them all the time, of the travel and the job opportunities and just leveraging it for future jobs and what it can do for your resume and experience. And just as a kid also, I was just really blown away by the helicopters and the Army man and stuff like that. And that was pretty appealing to me. And again, I've talked about this before, that even at that point, I didn't really truly fully know who I was or what I wanted to be or what I wanted to do with my life. But honestly, it really, I could tell, was going to mean a lot to my dad. I was never pressured. It was never, hey, Chase, I did it, you're going to do it kind of thing. Military service is huge in my family. We go back pretty much every generation. for hundreds of years, someone has served in the military. And so that stood out to me. My dad made a good case. I loved how my mom was supportive of it. And so, again, true to Chase's character back then, and honestly still a little bit today, a little bit, way less than back then, I wanted to appease them. I saw the joy that was all over my dad's face anytime that I talked about it. And anytime we went to a recruiter, or I would talk about PT, or talk about job opportunities, or just basic training, he just lit up. And a lot of it, I think looking back, was because he kind of wanted that legacy to continue on. True to our character, we love to serve, but we can't stay in. I got injured, got medically discharged. My dad was injured, he got medically discharged. And so I think he wanted to kind of like vicariously live that military career through me. And so, yeah, we just went one day. I was actually still in high school, my Christmas break, my senior year in high school, met with a couple of recruiters, had a great experience, and I swore in my Christmas break. I was technically 17. He had to sign a waiver to get me in. My biological mom had to sign a waiver to let me in. We actually had to redo it 2 or 3 times because she was crying the whole time. She actually wasn't as on board as the rest of my family was, because this was right after 9/11. This was 2002, 2003. And we were a country at war. And she was like, I don't want my baby, I don't want my son, to join the military and go to war. And so we actually had to redo it a couple of times because she was crying on the paperwork. So she was a trooper, but she believed in what I wanted. And my dad was so supportive. And yeah, so because of him and the role models I had from him and my stepmom and just that support system, I believed in so much. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. I can do that.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. For somebody listening to this that's maybe, 16, 17, 18 years old, or maybe even parents out there with kids that are thinking about being in the military, if I was 17 years old and I came up to you right now and I said, Chase, I've really been thinking about joining, any advice that you would give for me in terms of like helping me with my decision?
Oh yeah. This is one thing that I think a lot of people overlook, because in your head, I'm joining the military, right? So I'm giving away my life. And yes, it's true. It's a job. You're never off the clock. You're literally signing your life away. But also, until you sign your life away, until you sign that dotted line, you should view it as, what can they do for me? This is where some recruiters are a little more sneaky than others. Some try to like dangle an incentive over your head. Until it is in writing and on paper, don't believe it. Also, make them kind of fight for you. Talk to the Army, talk to the Marines, talk to the Air Force. You should always ask, what can Uncle Sam do for me? Because they need me, right? They need the body. They need the skill set. They need the brain to train, the body to train, and to fill a need, right? You should view it as any job opportunity. I know what I can bring to the table, but I think a lot of people overlook that aspect. They don't think, well, what can you do for me in terms of a sign-up bonus? When I signed up, I got college paid for, as well as a $20,000 enlistment bonus. So I got school, I got financial incentive, I got this amazing training. So go into it with that mindset of, all right, I'm giving you myself, literally mind, body, and soul for the next 2, 4, 6 years. But what are you going to do for me? And regardless of what they say, don't believe it until they put it on paper.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, man. That's great advice. So after you finished in the military, you came back and pursued school after that. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Like I said, I went through a string of injuries myself and became unfit for duty. Had both my hips completely reconstructed, back injuries, hamstring injuries, and just was non-deployable and a broken soldier. So I got kicked out, medically retired technically. And that really sparked the interest for the human body in terms of, I've always been active. I played sports. I've been in the most active job for the past 6 years that I think anybody could ever be in, but I was broken physically and I could no longer do a lot of the things that I was used to in terms of exercise, physical activity, but still in a lot of ways back then, just daily living. When I toured the college, VCU, I had to have my mom help me. I was on a cane. Like, she assisted me, this 23-year-old kid, hobbling around downtown Richmond, Virginia, touring VCU. But I knew that it's something I needed to do. And if I let myself get too comfortable in that transition, I literally started the week after I got out of the Army. I started school. And I very much so wanted to kind of just chill and relax and still rehab and recover. But I knew if I didn't jump on that opportunity then, I just didn't like the path where I saw a lot of other literal broken veterans go. And so because of that, I pursued exercise science. I enrolled in an exercise science program. I studied anatomy, physiology, nutrition, the human body, movement, applications in the real world in terms of corporate wellness, personal training, gym ownership, things like that. And that sparked it. I thought I was just going to study it to help my own self. But in the education process and through some cool field trips, technical field trips and shadowing experiences and internships, I fell in love with it. I fell in love with it as a way to kind of just continue to show my mind and my body of, no, this wasn't taken from me. Your physical capability is not yanked from you. It just needs to look differently. So it transformed my identity then in terms of who Chase was as the exerciser, the health, whatever, trying to eat well, be well, move well. And it sparked an interest for me to want to do it for others. And so I began working for a corporate wellness company locally. I partnered with a buddy there, and we did like private outdoor boot camps and personal training. You name it, I've done it in the health and fitness and wellness space. And then it sparked an interest. I was kind of continuing on with this one company and more medical model. I was doing like true exercise physiology testing and health coaching. And so I went on to grad school, got my master's in health promotion, continued down that identity of playing, the corporate chase and climbing that corporate ladder. But then I reached a breaking point with them. And I realized that my truest identity, and this is all around the same timeline I'm sharing with you, the earlier story of when I had that huge panic attack of like the personal identity. Chase was no longer matching with any other version of that. And so I did the personal work. I realized that I loved what I did, but where I was doing it was no longer serving me. And so that's when I really got true. I gave it my full effort, got very transparent with my employer. I told them, hey, I need room for growth. This is what I know I can do. And for a while, they gave me that autonomy. They let me do it. Climbed the ladder there, was in charge of the whole department up and down the East Coast. That's the internet. 1 second. But then I realized that it was no longer in alignment. And so that's when I decided I still loved what I did in the fitness and nutrition and coaching. But I left and I did it for myself. And going into my second year now, I'm my Chase that I know and love. I have found the identity that I've been searching for or fighting for, or rather has been fighting for me over these years. And I love it, man. I love it.
That's awesome, man. It's a great story. It makes me think on this kind of carrying off this last piece here and what happened in the movie theater. Have you ever thought about or how much of that stress from like the corporate world, the corporate environment that you're in was playing a part in the anxiety attacks? Do you think that was playing a big role at all, or was the setting not like super corporate stressful?
Oh yeah. I mean, I say corporate, but it was unique in the sense of we were, I was in gyms, I was in doctor's offices, I was, in this fitness environment, but in more my health coaching role, when I wasn't doing like VO2 max testing or PT testing or body comp scans, I was getting to know the person. I was asking physical self, nutrition self, relationship job, true health coaching. And a lot of the biggest breakthroughs we had were when people got real about their past experiences and more importantly, loss. And when a loss happened, how that transformed their identity, sometimes for the better, a lot of times, maybe not for the worse, but they didn't like who they became in that experience. And I became this hypocrite. I was like, oh, you got to do this. You got to do that. Here's how you get through this. It's good, asking all these questions and just being there, being present and helping coaching them through the process. But I would leave so stressed out from that experience because I wasn't doing the same for me, or something I would say to them, or I would tell them to do. I would be kind of mulling it over. Like, I should really do that. I should really do that. But then I wouldn't. And so honestly, a lot of the people that I served, a lot of we called them patients at that time, but my patients, my clients really were kind of continuously gnawing away at me, and helping me kind of figure my own shit out.
Yeah. I mean, I tell clients all the time and, like through a transformation or whatever, at the end of it, they're like, thank you so much. And, you've changed my life. And like, I mean, all those words are what keeps us going and is so inspiring. But I tell them, I'm like, I mean, honestly, like, you don't realize how much you do for us. Like, I
Exactly.
mean, like our clients are essentially like our ultimate like accountability tool, you know?
Yeah, it truly is. As much as we hopefully help them, I think a good coach, a good trainer, a good accountability partner, anybody will fully realize the amount of reciprocal work that they're doing for you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, dude, what was the first podcast that you ever listened to?
Ooh, the very, very first. I knew when I first got into podcasting, there were like a handful that I would always go to. I had to pick the first. I truly believe it is this guy. I'm his biggest fanboy. Shout out Sean Stevenson, man, the Model Health Show. Because at the time, like I said, I was working for this concierge medical practice. I was a health coach, exercise physiologist, and he just had the best platform. He was always talking all things health, fitness, nutrition, and a lot of what he talked about, I would then directly, like on my way into work, I would listen to an episode and go in and immediately apply it. So his show was a way for me to be better at my job at that time.
That's awesome, man. And dude, for anybody that's, you know, thinking about starting their own podcast, what would be your biggest advice for them before getting started?
Just do that, hit record. I talked to so many people, Justin, you and I have talked, who want to get into the space of, which host site do I need? Which microphone do I need? Which headphones do I need? Do I need this device, that device, this cable? The only secret recipe I have for people is just hit record. Regardless of whatever you're doing, start on your iPhone. There are even platforms you can launch and do everything on your iPhone. Just like anything else, you shouldn't get so bogged down in the details of trying to make it perfect, because if you try to make it perfect, it's never going to happen. The best time to do anything, best time to do your podcast is now. Just hit record and just start talking. Use it as an electronic digital journal and get it out of your head and find your voice. Literally find your voice. Just talk. Just hit record and talk and go from there. And it will improve. Trust me, I go back and listen to the first couple episodes of my show. I'm like, oh my God, you noob. But you know, this is the whole important part, is that you can grow and you can transform your identity through this process and truly find your voice. And it is a learning experience. Same thing in the coaching world. When you have a show and you have these guests, as maybe a unique conversation that they are able to have because of you, they help us become better interviewers. They help us, I think truly another, maybe second point after hit record, is don't focus on being an interviewer. Don't focus on being the person who asks the right questions at the right time. Be a good listener. Be a good listener. It's true for a podcaster, true for a coach, because when you listen, you're going to hear the things that people need to have mirrored back. You're going to hear a lot of times their own solutions to their own problems. You're going to hear how to be a part of the conversation right then and there, so that you can get a better conversation and not just get the same thing that they told the last 5 shows they were on, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I couldn't agree more. I love that. Take action and don't
do
the damn thing and don't use a script. I will say that's biggest thing I've learned. I've done like 40 episodes or so since I started this a couple months ago. At first I started using a script, and after like maybe 5 interviews, I was like, all right, I'm not using this anymore. And it's been a million times better ever since.
Halfway through my first episode, I had all these questions mapped out, and I found myself getting so caught up in those questions that I was missing the conversation, and I ditched it. First episode and never went back.
Yeah, I probably should have done that the first episode. I think it took me like 5, but hey, it happened, right? Well, dude, Chase, last question, my man. What are you most excited about going forward here in 2019? Anything big in the works? Anything coming? Anything that you can kind of leak out a little bit here for the listeners?
Absolutely. Now, some people will probably disagree with me and say that you should never release things until they're done, because life happens, things happen. But I like to use these. I'm a big visionary, right? I think big. I like to speak big, dream big, talk big, drink coffee big. TED Talk, got that coming out this year. I had my first kind of exploratory conversation with representation last week. It's not 100% official. We still have some kind of things to finalize, but I'm just getting my timeline down. This year for me is all about growth and getting kind of on the other side of the microphone. And luckily we're blessed enough to have such a great platform to where people want to come to us. And so that has allowed me the opportunity to spend less time on outreach and scheduling and finding people. I still greatly appreciate, but now I need to grow. The personal self, I'll say the personal brand a little bit, but it's truly getting on other platforms and getting a variety of platforms to really tell our story. So that makes more sense when they come back to our brand and our platform of what they're listening to, what they're experiencing in coaching, what they're experiencing when they put on a t-shirt. So it's all about storytelling and translating that identity to as many people as possible.
Love that, man. I love that. Well, dude, where can everybody find you at, Chase? On obviously there's the podcast, Instagram, website. Where's all that? Where can everybody find you at there?
Honestly, yeah, you can just Google Everford, and that's us. My brother runs the apparel, I run the coaching, the podcast, but all things Everford, that's us. My brother Max. You can my biggest platform I'm on every day, all day is Instagram, at Chase_Chewning. But yeah, Everford Radio, Everford Coach, Everford Apparel, that's all us, all EF thing.
Love it, my man. Well, Chase, thank you so much for taking the time, my man. I really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll talk soon.
Thank you.